Where are we?
We're ready to go for round two.
That's it. But yes, but I mean, it just see, I always do these things on the laptop
Yeah.
and do just general workday stuff on the PC. So, but that was just Scotty, our manager.
No, okay.
Um, yeah, and he juggles about I think at last count 6 or 8 bands, and getting him for 5 minutes, let alone I was talking for about 15 minutes, is quite a luxury. So you got to grab it when it's there. Anyway, let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Thanks so much for doing this just a few days out from the start of the Hard Road Tour.
Well, yes, in sort of we already have really, and hang on, I'm just Mark does want to do video on this one. Okay, well, we are.
That was
You want to shave or throw on a shirt? Apparently, someone said this is going back a while, a few weeks ago, right?
yeah.
Leading up to the release of the single. And it was particularly warm here in Sydney, right? There was about 2 weeks when it was, some days were sort of like in the late 30s, like 36, 38. Anyway, I've I didn't have a top on. I've come downstairs. I've come straight out of the shower, and didn't realise, how long it took. I think I had a shave as well. Whatever. But so I sit down and I turn on the laptop, and the meeting's ready to go. So I clicked on, and we got chatting, and away we went. And so Catherine's always checks up, that everything went fine and blah blah blah. She's very meticulous. So the person that said, "Does he?" Because that's right. The guy says to me, he's Canadian, and he says, blah blah blah. And I said, "No, it's pretty warm here. In fact, it's so warm. I'm not wearing a shirt. In fact, I'm not wearing anything except thongs." And he went, "You wear a thong?" I said, "No, thongs are things you wear on your feet, right? They're like a slip-on." I thought, like. So luckily, I was wearing thongs, right? So I held one up. Oh, that's a thong, because they, Americans,
Yeah.
Canadians, they think a thong is a G-string,
Yeah.
a G-string, right? So anyway, he said, "Oh, so you're not wearing a shirt?" I said, "No, I'm not wearing anything except thongs." So I had shorts on, right? But I thought, it's just a bit of a gag. But something about these Americaners, these people from the American continent, is that they take you literally quite a bit, don't they? Like if you say, "Oh, I'm not wearing anything," they go, "Oh God, he's naked," but they never ask. They're too polite, like. Anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah. Does he always do interviews naked? And that's why she said you might want to have a shave or put on a shirt or clothes or something.
Yeah. She rang
Yeah.
me to check up before, and I said, "Well, I'll be wearing a shirt, so let's go with that." So,
Yeah. Well, I got a shirt on. So
so
where did we leave off last time?
So we left off last time. We talked about all kinds of stuff last time, but we didn't
I
really get
know.
into the rock and roll. We talked about the single, and I,
Yep.
I gave you the highest compliment a man can give another man, and said that I preferred your version to that of Mr.
I, I
Steele's.
I was so grateful, so grateful, and um, yeah, I said to Catherine, I said, the man is a diplomat, a journalistic or a rock and roll journalistic diplomat. I said, um, but I talk about taking people literally. I mean, particularly when it was not. Yeah, particularly when it's compliments, but also when it's criticism.
Hmm.
I'm one of those people that suffers, right, from this very, very common syndrome, um, like, so, you know, like when you do something like a gig or whatever, and then, you know, you see comments, right? So Ronnie, our whiz kid on social media, like he's all over it because, you know, um, he's just so, you know, he's young and he's switched in to you know, the whole social media. So he knows how to work it, you know. And it's funny, you know, isn't it a curious thing about human nature that you can read 20 things of glowingly complimentary. They go, oh, mate, the band were on fire, fucking, you know, like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they're very complimentary about, you know, individual performances, but, you know, like in this case, in mine, whatever. And then there's one who says, you know what? I thought they looked a bit old and jaded. And that's the one you just think about that fucking comment for the rest of the week. It keeps you awake at night. It invades your thought patterns. You know, it's just a crazy thing about us, isn't it? About people. Like you can get 10, 20, 30 people saying, oh, fuck, you know, it was great. And you get one cunt who says it's not. And that's the one you remember, you know.
And that happened to me. That happened to me. I was over in Melbourne at a gig, and so many people always come up to me and talk about the website. And people have been probably reading it for years. And then one person came up and said they didn't like it, and that's the thing that stuck with me all night. And I thought, And then at the end of the night, I went over and talked to them and said, "What is it exactly about the site you don't like?" And they pulled it up and they went, "Oh, I've got the wrong site. I got the wrong website." I was so worried. But yeah, it's a fantastic single.
I'm the new PR agent for. I went and saw last week. I went and saw Killing Heidi.
Cool. Yeah, I saw them a couple of weeks ago
at Crowbar here in Sydney, and oh, fucking gee whiz, they're on fire. They're fucking amazing. But I tell you, the act there was 3 acts on. The middle act was Ellie Mae Barnes.
Oh yeah.
Go if you get a chance to see her at any stage. She's down, you know, like in your vicinity.
Yeah.
Go and see her. She's fucking Jesus. What a fucking voice. But like stage presence, she's just got this fucking real, you know. Oh, it's animal. It's animal magnetism. It's not like she acts like an animal, like you know, in the same way that I used to or whatever. But yeah, she's got this real thing going on. It's like I was standing back, you know, down the back of the room. I sort of have found a little corner to hide in, and and I thought. So anyway, at one stage, I was going to go outside and get a drink. So I just walked down through the crowd, and got closer and closer. And the closer you got, I mean, the people obviously, you know, in that situation, the luckiest people are close to the stage because they can see it, they can hear you draw breath. You know what I mean? Like, and she was just fucking. Oh, I was so impressed, so impressed. So if you get the chance to see Ellie Mae Barnes, go and see her. She's fucking worth the money. But Killing Heidi, not the original band. I get that, but the songs. And I can't remember her brother's name. The guitar player.
I can't remember Ella's brother's name either.
But he was I thought originally I went and saw them originally a couple of times. You know, back when they had the huge big album, which was a long time ago, 20 years or whatever it might have been. But you know, and I thought, I'll go and check them out because I love the songs. And I went and checked them out a couple of times live, and I thought they were great. I mean, I was mesmerised by her. She's fascinating. But pardon me, the band that played the other night, which is not the original lineup, but apart from Ella, the band really impressed me. They were fucking like as good as you get.
They were very tight. I saw them the other week on the Red Hot Summer Tour that came to Sandalford's in Perth, which of course you're on the next version of as well. Although in Perth, I don't think we get that version. We get you guys coming over to play with ZZ Top.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's two of my
Yeah,
that's
well, you know, the great thing about it is that we, as you know, we've toured with ZZ Top, through Europe first, predominantly, because you know we were the new kids on the block, and so we were drawing good crowds, and they thought if they put the two of us together, and to their credit, I remember Dusty, God rest his soul, he told me that they were presented with a bunch of acts to pick from, you know, and the tour was predominantly through Europe, included UK, and it was it was the comeback tour, which was I think El Loco, I think it might have been with that album.
Probably would have been.
But it was, you know, it was in you know 80, 81, 82, somewhere around that. So we were, you know, living in London, we were touring Europe constantly, and they loved the feel of the band, because it was a true boogie band, you know. It was and it swings, you know, like, in other words, it's real rock and roll. Got the rock and the roll, much like themselves. So they kind of thought, well, you know, there's a compatibility with the music, but we were, as I say, you know, we were the new kids on the block, and we were drawing that younger, you know, actually, strangely enough, as you know, metal audience into, but getting them into rock and roll. But then again, you think about bands like Quo, which aren't a metal or heavy rock band; they're a rock and roll band, and they're huge in metal land, in Europe particularly. But so actually, is it funny? You know, I've had this conversation with people, you know, like the guys from Sweet, and the guys from Slade, you know, bands that were really into, you know, I think we talked about Thin Lizzy, didn't we, last time?
And didn't as well, sorry to interrupt, but wasn't it around about that time you played with Rainbow as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And even though that lineup changed a little bit every now and again, I remember talking to Purple's drummer, Pace, and because he swings, and that early Deep Purple, you know, I mean, you listen to things like Lazy and da da da, Highway Star. That just, you know, and that, you know, that was a great rock and roll rhythm section, you know. And I remember we used to go to parties at Roger's place during that Rainbow tour, and I mean, we were talking about the difference between heavy rock and because Purple are known as a metal band, but they swung like a blues band, because that's what they were. When they started, they were, you know, it was all based around the blues, you know, you know, like, anyway.
It's all rock and roll to me. I remember one of the first gigs I ever saw was you guys supporting Rainbow at a place that was legendary in my youth, called Stafford Bingley Hall, which was it was a cattle market by day and a rock venue at night. So some nights you go down.
How do they deal with the aroma?
Some nights they didn't, and that was.
Now you might remember. We did a gig. I'm not even sure who it was.
Yeah.
But I remember talking to Alan Lancaster about it years later, and they'd done it too. It was a gig out on the end of a pier.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was an old wooden building, and I think it might have been like hexagonal or round, or.
Yeah.
But to get to it, you walked out on this wooden pier, and they held the gig in that whatever it used to be.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah. That
Yeah,
sounds,
it was. It just,
sounds like Brighton or somewhere like that. I know they've got a big pier there with a.
I mean, I know someone. I know that the manager that we had at the time, he'll remember. But yeah, I just thought maybe it was just one of those. It was
I'll get
we
back
get
to
out of
you.
get it. Yeah, we got out of the van to go to to do. They said, "You're gonna fucking love this gig. You're gonna love this gig," and it was fucking amazing. It just like went off like a frog in a sock. I mean, it was just it was fantastic. And then um, to get out of the gig, you had to come out of the gig and walk down and we spent like an hour and a half after the gig getting from the gig itself, like get out of the gig.
Thanks.
And then you had this walkway, like a pier.
Yeah.
So we just spent like at least an hour and a half, maybe, I don't know, but just time went away because we were all drinking and stuff, and just talking to the punters, because it was like, they were between us, and we had to go through the punters to get to the vans, right, to go. Fantastic. And and everyone was buying it because they were all drinking on the pier. Like they buy all the drinks inside the venue.
Yeah.
And bring them out. Yeah.
Those were the days, almost 50 years of great memories like that. It's you're a band that's been around all my life. I still remember the day when I first heard your music. I had a friend who had an older brother, and he had a fantastic record collection, but we could never touch it. So as soon as he got to 5 to 12, and he'd go down the pub, we'd have all the albums out. We'd be playing them on the stereo. And one of the first ones we put on was your first album. I just couldn't believe it, and it's been with me since that day. He also took me to that gig at Stafford Bingley Hall as well, because back in those days, if you're a kid with an adult, they'd let you into shows like that. So
but was it licensed? Can you remember? Was it
licensed?
It was licensed.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Might have even had a sip of beer, but might have been a bit too young for that. But there you go. So the Red Hot Summer Tour, you're over here with ZZ Top, which would be fantastic. But what a lineup! Could be one of the best lineups. George Thorogood, not too shabby. Living End, Baby Animals, Dallas Frasca, fantastic local band as well. So
are they? Okay. I don't know anything about them.
Definitely check them out. They've been around a while, but the power is something I think you'll love. I hear there's talk of retirement.
Yes. Well, publicly announced as I remember. Like, I think the first time I've been hinting at it for the last year and the year before, part thereof, when I finally made the decision that, like, Scotty, our manager, we were talking about, okay, what do we want to do over the next couple of years because of the rapidly changing nature of the business. I mean, over the last 20 years, we've seen some incredibly, I wouldn't, destructive is probably too strong a word, but we've seen, record sales diminish, like as in, that was the currency, if you like, was you produce an album and you count the success and the monetary value by sales, whereas that's the thing of the past. Artists make very, very little out of sales anymore. And so it's a new world, in other words, and things are moving on. And it brought very, very sharply into focus that we were nearly, we were 4 years shy at that stage of being 50 years old. And for years and years, I've always said, if we make it to 50 years, if we make it to 50 years, if we make it to 50 years. And then all of a sudden, 50 years are staring you in the face. And it's kind of like, you know, where I am at in my life, you know, because in a few years, you know, I'll be 80 years old. So, I mean, I know Jagger gets away with it and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's going to be a few others that are going to follow him.
Yeah.
I think I was talking to someone the other day about Lemmy. Well, a couple of times that I've been talking about Lemmy, and we were talking about the, you know, that forgotten single that I did with Biff from Saxon. But having said that, I think he's one of the people that would have defied the limitations of age, because he was very defiant young man, was our Leinster. And I think there's a few others that will keep going on. I mean, obviously AC/DC, even though Angus is a couple of years younger than I. But yeah, I think there are some people who realise that as long as you've got what the audience pay to see, there's a relevance, if you like, or at least an argument for, yeah, keep performing. So I think I'll perform in a band structure for a few years after the demise, or the end. It's not the demise, but the end of Rosie Tats. But it's significant that we were born, so to speak, in the earliest minutes of the new year of 76. We went on stage in 75, stopped our set halfway through at a notorious gangsters nightclub, and we were hired to do the New Year's party, and we stopped playing, and then, you know, Auld Lang Syne and all this kind of stuff, and then we continued playing. So we took our birthday from 75, we started playing. 76, we finished the set. So yeah, come the New Year's Eve we're going to replay that. We're going to go on. We've already made arrangements.
Yeah.
We're going to go on stage at about 11:30. We'll stop at about 2 minutes or a minute to 12. We'll welcome in the new year, and then we'll finish the set, and that's it.
Fantastic! That's amazing. I'd love to be there for that. I can't count how many times I've seen you guys over the years, and probably one of the few bands I've seen on 3 continents as well, which is fantastic. The Monsters of Rock cruise went down a storm. I just haven't had people. They can't stop talking about it, how well you went down there, how loved you are in places like that. Surely that's a huge part of your legacy, the fact that so many kids love Rose Tattoo and appreciate what you've done over the years. There's a real reverence there that you rarely see.
Yeah. I mean, I know I am a bit of a walking cliche in many ways, and I don't like to use cliches all that much, but not that there's anything wrong with cliches. I mean, it's just a repeated, really, in a sense. I mean, I'm not even sure of the dictionary interpretation of the word, but a cliche is a repeated truth, usually, and that becomes cliche. An oft repeated wisdom, if you like, or whatever it might be. You know, honesty is the best policy is one of the, you know, the most recognizable cliches of our time. But yeah, it was very humbling. The cruise, the few times that we've done it, the rock cruise, Mork, it's always been a lot of fun. And the aspect that I enjoy the most is, I mean, I love meeting Americans and other surroundings. I mean, there was even people there that do travel to cruise from Europe. Yeah. You know, we met bona fide, like we met recognizable Germans and French and Spanish people that we recognize from our gigs when we do Europe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're there so often and they're so recognizable, you know. That yeah, they turned up on the walk cruise, but always one of the most enjoyable aspects for ourselves, apart from playing, you know, because you know we haven't toured or played in America since '83, so it's a great way of at least meeting and playing with some of the old guard, you know, the people that were around back in the day. But one of the things that's great is associating with bands, other band members, and we actually had two, Americans play in the lineup for this cruise, and Johnny plays bass with LA Guns, and Scotty plays drums with numerous bands, but you know, he's one of the go-to drummer because he's just so solid and reliable, and he can play all sorts. I mean, he plays in a jazz band, and they're like a fusiony sort of modern, sort of not really like Weather Report or any of those kind of bands, but you know, it's a very modern, you know, time sequencey sort of. So he's very, very good at what he does. But yeah, they're playing on the cruises is a wonderful experience for many different reasons. But you know, I mean, yeah, and the accolades that are quite generously given our way have always, you know, I say when I say like cliche, humbled us, because you realise that, you know, success is not, although selling a couple of millionaire albums would have been kind of nice, but success is not measured by how many albums you sell. It's
who you
know, the impression that you've made.
Mm.
Yeah. So I mean, in that sense, I mean, in a very poetic sense, you know, we can look back, and even Ronnie, you know, because like, you know, as I said before, Ronnie's been wanting to be in a band since he was a teenager, you know, like when he was just just a kid, you know, and he was learning to play guitar, and he was obviously, you know, he had this extraordinary talent. He was gifted in other sense because he was a natural.
Yeah.
And even at his age, and he's only, you know, see, there you go. That's the wonderful romantic story of him proposing to his schoolyard sweetheart.
Yeah.
And they got reunited a couple of years ago when he came back to Australia, and you know, he was coming out of a disastrous marriage, and you know, he was hurting, and as you know, they were childhood sweethearts at school, and so she, you know, immediately took care of him, and those early months when we first met her, they weren't involved romantically.
Yeah.
And they both were sort of walking around it, I think, to a certain degree. And then they realised that you know, let's not waste any more time. You know, they both loved one another deeply, obviously, because he's. But then again, to have him propose mid-song on the ship was fucking extraordinary. One of those great romantic, rock and roll romantic moments, which makes it kind of, you know, with the Rose Tattoo story, it's you know, it's kind of, you know, like, well, that's never happened before, so it's kind of, it's enriched the story even further.
That's right.
And we had people in the audience, because when that happened, the reason he took opportunity of the occasion was that is in Bad Boy, and it's where the band jams. The two guitar players throw to one another, and they could do this like blues thing. And you know, the band were cooking, like, so, and I was I was euphoric. And so I've jumped off the stage and I've gone into the audience to dance with a couple of these particularly very fine looking girls that I'd seen from the stage, and realised that one of them was about 5'10", which didn't deter me. But so I'm down in the audience, and the band sort of just brought it right back, and the guitar players were sort of like, doing that sort of beautiful little, just sparse bluesy sort of almost Kossoffy sort of stuff, and all of a sudden I hear this voice, Rose, there's something I have to say, and I've gone, what the fuck, and he said, Rose, we were childhood sweethearts, words to the effect that, because they were too young, typical teenage romance, and he said, I lost you once. I'm not going to lose you again. Oh, still gets me. And,
yeah.
So I want you in my life for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? And of course, she's up the back, like beaming like the sun itself. And it is a classic thing, right? So her name's Rose. Yeah.
Wonderful.
My mother's name was Rose.
And you've got a new album out by the end of the year, aren't you?
We're working on it, yes. We're working on it. Again, going back to the format, like I said to Scotty the other day, I said, we've only got like half a dozen really, what I consider to be really strong ideas that are good enough to pursue and persist with. And they're shaping up. And he said, it doesn't really matter these days. I mean, if we're going to do, which everyone is doing these days, or most people are doing, is particularly rock and roll bands, or heavy rock bands, whatever, metal. They are doing a limited amount of vinyl.
Yeah.
Do they still make records out of vinyl?
Yeah.
Do they? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. They fill it with all kinds of stuff, but it's
yeah. So he said it doesn't really matter if there's 6 tracks or 8 tracks or 10 tracks or even more tracks. So
wonderful.
Yeah. So we'll have that. We'll have it out by the end of the year, definitely. I mean, and I was just sort of fooling around with them. They said, came up just talking about marketing. I said, like, are we going to call it the Hard Road or Hard Road? And I said, well, that would be sort of like predictable.
Yeah.
The single is Hard Road, but maybe something as simplistic as like the Long Road or the Road, or
I'll send you
something like that.
I'll send you some ideas. I had a few.
A
few ideas for the end of the thing. I'll swing them by Cat. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'll get a chance to see you in a few weeks when you hit Perth for the ZZ Top date as well. So
yes,
I'll be down in the pit taking some pictures.
Have you fixed up your tickets and that for that?
I haven't as yet. I was going to go down and take some photos.
Just talk to Kat about it.
Oh, cool. I will. Yeah.
Because the new people, again, going back to the changing face of our business, the new people that have taken over, I think it's One Nation, I think they're called, or who might be running that tour. But they're very nice. They're very good people, and they either know about the business. I can't imagine why they'd get into the business if they didn't know about it, but they really seem to know how to run the business, and so it's very efficient, very, very professional, and they're pretty good at they're very good at really in our limited experience so far, but they're very good about looking after the acts. Yeah. Which is an integral part of the business, because I mean,
absolutely is. I had some. I got something in the mail this morning. which
Woo!
I thought it was going to be a compilation, but it looks like it's 3 live albums and the last 2 studio albums. But
Oh, okay.
I'd never heard the set from.
I told you about my find, didn't I?
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Just I was looking for I told you.
Yeah.
I was looking for empty covers in a box, in a shoe box that I knew had all these empty covers for, when you, so it's so easy to break the face cover of a CD box.
Yeah.
So I've kept them all these years, and there amongst it was this whole set. So it was the small the 3 Small Faces albums.
Yeah.
Nutwood Rug, and I think one's just called Small Faces, and the other one's a title. What did I do with them?
The long playing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
A nod's as good as a wink to a blind horse.
Oh no! This is pre-Faces. This is Small Faces. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've got a cover. I've got a vinyl of Nutwood, whatever. It's got a picture of like a tobacco tin on the front or something.
Not going flame. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well,
thank you so much for your time this morning. It's always a pleasure. Good luck on the tour, and
thank you. Is there anything else you needed to know?
No, that's perfect. I've got everything I need. I'll stitch that all together, and
fabulous.
I'll see you in Perth with ZZ.
So yeah, come and have a beer with us, and it's going to be, as you said, it's a colossal lineup. I think apart from ZZ Top, that we're already very, very good friends with. Sad that Frank won't be coming. No. Sad that Dusty's not there. But the other band, which George Thorogood, George, he's a fan, he likes our music, but whenever they're in town, we always his band usually does like after gigs. I'll show up at a nightclub and just play a set. And myself and whoever's available in the Tats lineup would go down and jam a couple of songs with them, So
that'll be fantastic.
Good.
I shall see you.
It's a great lineup.
Take care, my friend.
One of the things that's become a real reality in recent times, and it's the harsh reality of life itself, is that, as George Harrison once said, all things must pass. There is the immortality that we enjoy is not to do with our own lifespan. It's to do with the things that we create. Love, children, legacies, those kind of things. That they are the enduring. So in a sense, I've sort of worked out or accepted that that's our immortality. I mean, I think there's an immortality attached to the spirit or the soul, more the soul than the spirit, because in my own reasoning about our spiritual existence or being, is that they are 2 separate entities in a sense. The spirit is the life source that comes from we go back to that, to the universe, if you like, to the creational process, whatever that may be and whatever you perceive that to be. But so the fragility, if you like, of life has been sharply in focus in recent years, and like many perceptions and like many not so much wisdoms comes from it, but they're brought about by pain. And, I have long said, from the stage when introducing Scarred for Life, the song, and or other songs that we do, that, pain is our greatest teacher, but pain illuminates and brings things into focus, and it's pain and loss,
Yeah,
endurance.
it gives moments of clarity, doesn't it? And it helps put things in perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Without it, we're left to, I suppose, uh, struggle with, um, putting, allowing the pieces to make sense, if you like. And it's a welding process. It's like I said, at the same time, it's like, it's kind of like, I remember talking about it years and years ago, and I said, when confronted in a physical confrontation, if that person gets in the first punch, if you survive that first punch, it heightens your senses. In some cases, if it's a well-placed punch, it'll dull them, which gives you the physical advantage as the person, who's thrown the first punch. But if it doesn't, it heightens everything. What it brings about is like, wow, like, this is like, it just brings you into the moment, so to speak. And all pain is like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
Like I said, it's brought it because I'm compelled by the necessity to talk about the band's demise, because it's just around the corner.
It is. Lots of things come to an end, and I guess that
Everything.
the great music that we had in the 70s that we thought was going to last forever is getting older and older and older as we go, as we all are. But you're still here to enjoy it with us for hopefully a good long time. We've got a tour around the corner. I do want to ask you first, though. We've got loads of friends over in the States. How was the cruise?
Oh, look, the cruise is always fantastic. I mean, it's a great morale booster. That's a sort of a polite way of saying it's a great ego booster, because one of the things that we enjoy about I mean, apart from the physical delights, the company, the lack of responsibility of just eating and drinking and partying, and the only time you go back to your cabin is when you need to recuperate, regenerate, like, so. But you're in the company of all these other blokes out of other bands, and you either, well, it's reciprocal too, because you in a lot of cases you like that other band, and you get to know the members because you've got to like them through their music, obviously. And it's nice. It's very uplifting, and it's very, it feeds, as I said, the ego, but it also feeds, that need that we all have to be accepted and appreciated as human beings. But also, when you're an artist or you're a performer, you very much enjoy the acknowledgement of what you do or what you've created musically. So it's pardon me, it's a great atmosphere for positivity, and it's great atmosphere for like-minded people. And that extends to everybody that's on the ship, of course, that's there to see the bands, because it's a common thing. It's like we all, confined in this amazing physicality, at sea, sadly not under sail, but, well, in a sense, gratefully, because having read a lot about the early era of sailing, and even the modern applications of sailing, there's a lot of hardship involved. Whereas on a cruise ship, there's no hardship at all. The only hardship is enduring, surviving, like the hedonistic sort of irresponsibility of it all. But yeah, it was a great experience. And, I've always, for many, many years, I've looked at the experiences that one has, any person, yourself, like myself, anyone in the band, whatever. I've always looked at that. Well, try and appreciate it for its spontaneity and its instance in being, well, it's now, and try and enjoy the moment as much, because we've lost the ability to live or be in the moment. Now, I'm rereading a book at the moment called The Secret History of the World, and it relates to it starts out explaining that all that we know started out as an idea. It's my bedside reading at the moment. I mean, I always read 2 or 3 books simultaneously. Just going back to my fascination with ships under sail, I allow myself to ride. If I'm reading 2 or 3 books, from time to time, because they're usually historical, or they're usually about history, and or they're factual in the sense that they might be a biography or an autobiography, or a recently written book about the state of play, so to speak. Like I started reading some time ago, rereading Noam Chomsky's a book on the the dark state, and because I saw this thing on FaceFart about Noam Chomsky is no longer able to write. He's aged to the point where the degeneration of his aging, the degeneration of his ability to actually write. He can still speak, which is great, because he's now doing stuff to camera, like I suppose you call them podcasts or whatever you might call them. But he's now talking about his ideas and et cetera, et cetera. And so I always I try to reread things. I've learned this very, very early in the piece, is that if you usually you read a book, and if it marks you or it affects you, to the point where you think, my God, that that's in other words, it might change your opinion or your perception, or it might influence a change, or it might open up another avenue of thinking, or as a man once said to me, the man who actually spiritually opened me, he said, part of our role as a thinker is to ponder. And it's a very, very important word, pondering, because when you ponder, you sit and you try to think through, if you like, all the aspects of whatever it is that confronts you. And he also said that pondering is part of our process of observation. And he said it's very important to observe ourselves, and also all the things around us, so that we get a deeper understanding for life itself. But because that's the macrocosm, but the microcosm that we live in from day to day, he said it's all worthwhile to hold your attention and have your attention, not continuously. Well, it's a practice to do it continuously. So you're doing it without thinking, in other words. you know, so that you're just a natural observer. You're always soaking up, you know, the sensory experience of just going through a normal day,
Yeah.
which is fun. Yeah, but anyway, this particular book,
That's the one. Yeah.
You're aware of it?
I read the Gillian Barnes one, which I mistakenly thought it was, but I read that one about 6 months ago for the first time.
Mm.
Someone sort of said you should try this, and it's a wonderful read. I love stuff like that, and like you, I think I've got about 5 books on the go at the minute, so I'm a habitual reader. I love that slow time that just takes you away from all the distractions of the internet and Netflix and all that kind of nonsense. Um,
Yeah.
I'll stick on a vinyl record and read a book. Why not?
Ah, yes. I, I have always talking about vinyl records. So I find in recent years, I finally avail myself of a very, very good quality turntable. And there was a pair of old Bose speakers from the 70s. I think they were built. And I had them, you know, reconed, etc., and they're beautiful sound to them. And I just now I have to find. I've got a good. It's a Yamaha amplifier, but I think there's better quality to be had, which is one of the positive attributes, if you like, of FacePart, is they've got that marketplace thing. But isn't it funny? You know, it's funny because I'm finally, I'm again addressing my mortality in regards to my physical and mental and spiritual health. And you know, I am at my age. I've now had this new surge of enthusiasm to be as physically able as I possibly can, because you know, when you're really looking at your lifespan, you think, well, I've got 15 years left, maybe 20 at the outside. There's longevity in my family on my mother's side. You know, my mother died last year, and she was 96, even though her last 5 years she was lost to dementia. But and I've talked to my surviving cousins, etc., and all their mothers and fathers that belong to mum's family. All lived well into their 80s or into their early 90s. So there is a longevity within mum's side of the family. And so, you know, I'm looking forward when I say that, in the sense that, you know, I possibly could live into my 90s. And if I do, I want to be
Good as possible.
yeah, I want to be a thinking, rationalizing, and physically capable person. I don't want to be a burden, in a sense, to others, let alone myself. I mean, watching my mother deteriorate and drift away, to live in another time, to live in another dimension, but it's another time, because she went back to Mauritius.
Yeah.
And she spoke only in Creole for the last 3 or 4 years of her life. And when my cousin and I, who lived very close to her in Melbourne, as you know, I live in Sydney. So I would see her, you know, only 3 or 4 times a year, depending on when I was down there, or I could go down there. And my cousin, who was one of her closest nieces, we would sit with mum, and she would be talking, and she'd be looking across the room, and sometimes she'd be looking at us, but she would be talking in Creole. And Kathy, I remember saying to Kath, what's she saying? And I said, you know, when she was looking across the room, she said, she's talking to her mother or her father as if they were in the room, and also her siblings, because they passed over. And, there's been some experiences in recent years to do with coming into contact with people that the son that I lost some years ago, he's made contact through the medium of channeling through other people. And it's such and it's an experience, if you like, or a concept that I had already embraced because of Mum. I remember Mum, when I was in my even pre-teens, but certainly in my teens, Mum would say to me that she dreamt things. She would put it like that, dreamt things, but she used to have visions and premonitions, and she would talk about that. But she said it was not uncommon on the island when she was growing up as a child.
Yeah, there's so much we don't know, and
Absolutely.
I guess one day we might fill in some gaps, but there's so much that's unexplained, which in a way is I think how it should be. It's
Absolutely. I mean, getting back to the what triggered this line of thought or conversation. I love the concept, and I'd forgotten all about it. But in the early parts, Jonathan Black alludes to that the universe, before there was the physicality that we know as the universe, therefore life, there was an idea or an emotion. And I remember Dr. Groves, and he's the man I mentioned that spiritually opened me. I studied with him in a group, an esoteric or a spiritual group for some years ago before he passed. And one of the things that he said, he was doing a lecture on the process of spiritual inspiration, and he sort of took the parables, if you like, or the stories from the Bible and other spiritual works that have been handed down from the Egyptian, from the Jewish feeds, if you like, into and he said, he posed a question. He said, what comes first, the thought or the reaction, the thought or the emotion? And almost everybody said, well, you think something and then you have a response, right? So it can be emotional or it can be intellectual, So he said, no, he said the divine has designed it as such that the very first instance of anything is an emotion. And then you have an intellectual response to that. Then you react to it because it's gone through the process that we understand. And so because we're so literal and we live in such a literal existence, materials, in other words, which is quite fine. I mean, it's quite natural. It has to be. We are physical beings. We are a spiritual being within a physical body, right? So accepting that concept in totality. So it makes all the sense. When I read those opening chapters about the expulsion, the Book of Enoch and the expulsion of, well, not so much the expulsion of the angels, but the fact that, like once man had gone from thought or emotion to vegetable and then to material, the process is, he just describes the process in language that we can understand or accept. And the bits fell back into place for me, because I thought, I remember Dr. Groves saying that our first response, our first realization, if you like, to use probably a more appropriate word, is an emotional thing, because our first instance spiritually our emotive, their emotion. You know, the first thing that we experience is, I mean, I was watching this thing on Google Tube, what's that program you have on your phone? The other one, not Face Fart, the other one. Isn't it funny? Because I watch this stuff every day. Yeah, the YouTube, the Google, I call it Google Tube, but it's just, but you know, there was this fascinating series on it, which I've prescribed to now or have subscribed to. And it's about, you know, all this research being done into human development, starting from embryonic moments, and particularly into very early childhood. And there's this wonderful, wonderful piece, and it says the beauty of being completely adored, as some people adore the concept of God, right? So it's all encompassing, and it's got this wonderful video of this baby that's days old, and the mother's cradling it, and the baby is looking at its mother, and the look on this baby's face cannot be described in any other way as just complete adoration. And that child is experiencing the first moments of living, which is, you know, love. And I realized that when I first met Roxanne, my eldest child, or our eldest child, and she was 3 weeks old when I first met her, and that's when I went away. Within the next week or two, I wrote the lyrics for Suddenly, because I realized that when she looked at me, I'd never been looked at like that before, ever, by anybody, not ever. It was a beginning moment, and I looked at her, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and I remember, and I do this when I do public speaking, because the people often ask me, well, what was the moment that changed you? Like significantly in your life. You know, why did you give up, or not give up, but why did you change your wicked ways as a totally irresponsible, dysfunctional singer in a rock band, and become, you know, what I have or did become. And I said, and I always tell that story about that moment, because, I mean, apart from the fact that changed me irreversibly, you know, for that moment, but the moment of illumination when I realized she looked at me in such a pure, unadulterated, there was no preconception. It was just, you know, a child looking at their parent in the only way that children look at their parents, which is complete adoration. It's not even adoration. It goes way beyond that. It's such a spiritual moment that, you know, you are indelibly marked by that for the rest of your life.
Of course, as soon as you go, they've gone. I think it was a parcel. They've left a letter. Hopefully, it's the new Humble Pie compilation that's coming out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got that.
Interesting. Isn't it funny? Interesting.
I could always talk to you all day. I've actually got to go to work in about 10 minutes. Can we continue this conversation?
Sure.
Because
I'll tell you something. 6 degrees of separation, Mark.
Yeah.
I was going through some boxes. I was looking for, and I've got about, and I found the box. It's an old shoe box, and it's got about 20, maybe more, empty CD cases, right? So,
yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
I was looking for one that was complete, right? Because I've got I've been playing a lot of Gypsy Kings lately, and one of the covers was broken. Yeah. It always has been. So I went looking, and I found in there a complete set that someone had given me of Small Faces.
Wow.
and Humble Pie dubs. There's like 6 or 7 CDs.
Yeah.
There's three Small Faces, all the Small Faces albums, and there's 4 or 5 of Humble Pie. Now, 2 of them being live. One was the live at the Fillmore, which is one of my favourite albums of all time.
Yeah.
But there's another live compilation, and it's got tracks off that and off Smoke, and they did another one, didn't they, after Smoking?
Oh, they did a few after that.
Sorry?
They did a few after that. I even like some of the obscure stuff, like I think the last album, was it Street Rats or Thunderbox or
Thunderbox?
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. It was always one of my favorite vocalists.
Absolutely.
But some of the footage that's emerged since then has revealed, some of the some amazing moments live. But I remember back in the day when he had the very, very young Peter Frampton,
yeah,
and realizing early on in the piece that Frampton was responsible for a lot of the soloing. But some of the footage that I saw of him in his later years, he was turning out to be quite a handy guitar player. Apart from he always had a wonderful rhythmic.
Yeah, I saw him live in a little pub where I used to live in Nottingham just about 6 months before he died, and he came on. He had his band with him. I don't know if they were called Packet of Three at that time, but something like that. And then he played just him and a guitar, and it blew me away. And it's the only time ever, well, one of 2 times ever, I've just been unable to speak. He just walked straight up to where I was at the bar and just got a beer and lit a cigarette, because you could do in those days. And I just was open mouth thinking, this is the guy that has produced some of the best music ever. And I got him signed a beer mat. He signed a beer mat for me, which I still have, which is one of my most treasured possessions. But I wanted to speak to you about rock and roll as well. I love our conversations about other stuff, but I'm
sorry, because I'm guilty. I mean, it's when you find people that you very much relate to, it's very easy to start to. I mean, music is the thing that brought us together. So there's always that wonderful connection. But I mean, there's other things that occur to friends when they meet that and it might be just sort of like random, like it was today. I mean, just that I suppose just wanted to or needed to share some stuff, with you. So
I'll tell you what there was one thing I wanted to say to you today, and it's about the single Hard Road, which is from an album that I love by an artist that I love. Everyone's on there. The Easy Beats guys are writing stuff. But many, many years ago, and you all know this, there was a gentleman who covered that very song on an album called Smiler. A gentleman that we both love. And I love your version more than I love that version.
Oh, darling, thank you so much. That's the most appropriate thing you could have said. I feel now capable or able to be able to say the same thing. There's not much of that other artist's work that I don't like. In fact, I don't think I've ever, even stuff that doesn't thrill me. Exactly. But I've often said in recent days that when we covered the Black Eyed Bruiser on our last album, which was 2009, we're not known for being prolific, but there's another album in the works at the moment, actually.
I know, and I wanted to talk about that as well. That's
Well,
fantastic.
there's not been a lot of progress because we're sort of finding our niche, if you like, and I'm onto it. I think the boys, and I've been able to influence and or guide some of the music they've been coming up with, which is good because it's starting to take on a real. Because I mean, after so long, we've never been. I don't think we've ever been guilty of replicating the album before. But the other thing too is that it's a different lineup of people. So there's a lot of all that authenticity to draw on. That because they're so respectful, the two guitar players that are so respectful of the past, and so I've been. It's not something that they were resisted, but they needed. I kind of felt when we've talked about when we sat around and started talking about ideas for songs. I think it was a relief for them for me to say, listen, I don't want to hear the past. I want to tip my hat to it. I want to acknowledge it in some sense with the new music. But the past is the past. So you can't be brought back. You know what I mean? There's a great wisdom that's along the lines of, I acknowledge the past, but I don't live there anymore. And, so this lineup has to, create an album. But I think getting back to Hard Road, when I discussed with Stevie after I'd sent him the version that we did of the Black Eyed Bruiser, and he loved it. He said, it's just like he said, it just sounds like Tats. And I said, well, no one sounds like Stevie, right? As a solo artist. And I said, well, I've got another surprise for you, because he and I were friends, like really close. And I started out as a fan, and we ended up working for the same company and blah, blah, blah. So we got history. And he loved Black Eyed Bruiser. The next song we're going to do is Hard Road. And he lit up like a Christmas tree.
Oh, fantastic. Can we organise another time with Kat?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh,
talk to Catherine.
And I'll make sure I'm not going to work in an hour like next time.
Well, if you want to do it next week, that's fine.
Perfect.